All right, man, I got my dagger ready for some skullduggery. Oh, Raymond E. Feist. That's who we're going to be talking about today. Mid-Camilla. Raymond E. Feist. Magician's Apprentice. It's going to be a great review. Great review, guys. Strap yourselves in. I'm Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Man, we are going to be talking about Magician by Raymond E. Feist, one of the most iconic fantasy novels of all time. One of the greatest, most popular, beloved fantasy writers of the 80s and 90s. Nobody was selling more books than Raymond E. Feist back in the day. And well-deserved, well-deserved. I mean, let's just start with the copies I bought when I was a kid, all right? I still got them. These are the original 2 Magician books that I bought when I was a kid. You know, the hardcover came out, it was just one big book called Magician. For some reason, when they did the mass market paperbacks, they broke it up into Magician's Apprentice and Magician Master. I had no problem with that. Whatever, they did what they did. I bought these books. The cover price on these books that I bought when I was a kid in the 1980s, $3.95 a piece. They were so cheap back then. I can't believe it. They were just so cheap. And then I want you to just take a look at these covers and tell me they don't just scream 1980s fantasy. And don't they just get your heart pounding to go read some awesome 80s fantasy? They do me. They do me. I read this series, and let's go over the series first here. But I read this series all half a dozen times when I was a kid. So we have Apprentice Magician Master. Covers done. These covers, since we were talking about them already, let's talk. Kevin Johnson was the guy that did the covers of these. Very, very good. Very, very good. They were redone in the late 90s by an also awesome fantasy illustrator named Don Mates. And then they've since been redone in this more sort of just kind of graphic lettering. So they've went through a few changes, but I love my originals. I'll never get rid of them. So the series consists of about 30 books, of which I have about half of them, okay? So we got Magician Apprentice, Magician Master, followed by Silverthorn, A Darkness at Sethanon. That was the original 4 books in the series. And then, a few years later, he did this 2-book series, The King's Buccaneer and The Prince of Blood, which was set a little bit, all the same characters from this, set a little bit later. And then he did another 4-book series, The Serpent War Saga, which I have here. And then he teamed up with Janie Wirtz and did the Daughter of the Empire series, which I've got right here. And the covers of those were done by Janie Wirtz herself, the co-author. And when I review these books, we will talk about those covers and her as an artist/author, which I am also an artist/author. So that's kind of the series that I've got so far. The Land of Mid-Camilla and Raymond E. Feist, kind of like the Shannara novels and, you know, the Forgotten Realms novel. I mean, he's written so many books in this series. I just don't have them all. I haven't read past what you see here. But what you see here, I have read a lot of times. And I love them. I love them. I absolutely love them. Maybe down the road, I'll get the rest of the other 15 or 20 books in the series. You never know. You never know. Let's just talk about these. Magician. Both of these books are going to be included in this review right now. We're reviewing this as if it's one big book, all right? Just for the notes that you're taking at home. Because there will be a test. Magician by Raymond E. Feist. Came out in 1982 with the covers we've already talked about. This is the roots of 1980s fantasy. Simple adventure. I mean, just from the get-go, I just reread these books not long ago, not having read them since I was in high school, okay? And just from the opening scene, I was like, oh, I was just loving every minute of it because it swept me back to my youth, where fantasy novels were just these simple adventures. And this starts out so simply with just a boy on the seashore, adventuring on the seashore just by himself, twists his ankle, gets hurt, tries to go back to the castle, gets lost in the wood, a huge storm. He's worried about the goblins in the wood, and he stumbles upon, his name is Pug, by the way. That's our main character's name. Pug, young boy, one of the most iconic young magicians in fantasy, Pug. And we get introduced to him right here from the get-go of the series. And he's in these woods, he's lost, it's a storm. And just those first 5 pages, where that's all that's really happening, just fills you with a sense of, and Raymond E. Feist lays out and layers in the sort of the world building just in those few scenes, and you're following this kid along as he's alone in the woods and in the storm and the dark weather, and you're just anticipating the adventure to come. Because you know it's coming. You know he's going to be, we're off on a grand fantasy adventure. He's in the forest. He has an encounter with a pig that's got tusks. He has to fight the pig. And all through this, you just get the sense of Raymond E. Feist as a young writer just finding his way through the story, right? You can tell he's just finding his way through the story as he goes. He's making it up as he goes along, but it's made up very well. And every word choice that he uses just fills you with more and more enchantment and wonder and just excitement for the adventure that you're getting prepared to go in. And he runs into the pig that's got the tusks, and he has to tussle with the pig. And then the archer comes out of the woods and saves him and whisks him off into the storm and into shelter in a cabin. And that's when we meet Colgan, the main magician. He becomes the magician's apprentice to Colgan. And honestly, that scene is painted right here on the book, where Pug comes out of the storm into the little cabin, and he meets his magician and the fire drake. And the archer is Meekum. He's sort of like the warden or something like that of the land. The Franklin, I can't remember what they called it, but Raymond E. Feist did his research on medieval life, and you can tell in these books, because he nails all of it down. Everything about the society and structure of medieval life is evident just right in those first 10 pages. So you're in the hands of a young writer that's done his research, that's finding his way into this story, this fantasy land, and you're on the ride. You're there for the ride. I was rereading this as an adult, thinking back to when I was a kid about how much I just loved these and loved rereading again as an adult. You know how that is, that nostalgia, right? And so this review is going to be gushing a lot based off of just pure nostalgia. So, and that's, now we've met Pug, Meekum, and Colgan. Things happen, right? Okay, the things happen in this book. It's very, very Tolkien-esque, very Belgariad, very sort of Shannara. It's very, very quest-oriented, but we've also got our prince and our king. Well, our king and his princes. And let's just mention some of those guys, because I'm telling you, I remember rereading these. And every new character that would come up on scene, I would be like, oh, I remember them, I love them. Right? We've got, Pug's friend Thomas, for instance, plays a big, huge role throughout the whole series. His friend Thomas, and then Martin Longbow, the king and his sons Liam and Arutha. Arutha's like kind of the hero of the whole thing, and it's just done gorgeously. I don't want to get into too many of the plot things, because we meet up with dwarves, goblins, trolls, elves. We even meet up with people from a different planet or something like that. Literally, this is a portal fantasy. The crux of the plot is this. a portal opens up in the world of Mid-Camia, in Kellowan, in this area, not Kel, yeah, no, a portal from Kellowan, which is another dimension, which has other fantasy people in it, other fantasy characters in it. A portal opens up that the two worlds can cross. So the two fantasy worlds can cross. Kellowan and Mid-Camia. And so I pronounce it the Serani. The Serani are the sort of warrior class of Kellowan, and they come through this portal into Pug's world that's full of the elves and the dwarves and all the magical creatures. These Serani come through, and they're a war. They're just after. They just want to fight. They're gonna fight. They come out of the portal with a rage into fight, right? And so that's the plot. And Pug and all of our heroes, Arutha, Lori, Liam, the King, Thomas, Pug, Colgan, Meekin, they all have to, the Fire Drake, they all have to get together, band together, and go off on these different adventures. And each character is drawn so wonderfully. And like I said, as I was rereading these books and coming across each character and what you gotta do, and this is the thing, here's the writing advice portion of this, is Raymond E. Feist takes his time every time one of these new characters walks on scene. And the reason why these characters are so iconic is because he describes them in just a short paragraph, just who they are, what they're wearing, and their demeanor, and sort of a little bit of their personality, just as soon as they walk on scene. And a lot of them are described, I mean, if you really want to study it, I marked down in my notes, if you really want to study how to do description right, read page 22 through 26 in the paperback, and read as he's introducing Prince Arutha, Prince Liam, Princess Caroline, or Carline, I can't remember how it is. Read how he describes Martin Longbow and Lori and all these characters that sort of come introduced in those few pages, 22 to 26. Read how each one of them is introduced, and you can learn a lot about how to introduce a character onto your scene. He does it so well, and that's one of the reasons I remembered these characters, because as soon as they walked up, I'm like, I haven't thought about that character in 25 years. And now he walks up on scene, and it's like an old friend has come into my house. That's how special these books are. That's how special they are. And so I was just delighted rereading these things. Just absolutely, utterly delighted to just reintroduce myself to this world and these characters and this portal that they go back and forth into this other fantasy realm. So the characters, they just into the and Pug has to, our new magician, our magician's apprentice, has to figure out his magic. And that's another cool thing that is started way before Harry Potter. Raymond Feist did this before Harry Potter did this. And it is the let's choose sort of what school, you let the magic hat choose whether you're Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw, or because there's a scene early on in these books where all the kids in the realm, they have their choosing day where they are it's chosen. It's not Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, but it's chosen. You are going to go be a priest. You are going to go be a farmer. You are going to join the archery team. You are going to be a spearman in the and then they get to Pug, and he's the last one chosen. And all of his friends have been chosen to be in the army, and he's like, oh, they're just so jealous. Can I be chosen to be the army? And they're like, you are going to be the magician's apprentice. And he's like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that is. What is that? What is that? What do I do with that? What do I do? But he takes it in stride. He makes the most of it, and he becomes the biggest, most fantastic magician Mid-Camia has ever known. It takes a lot of books before he reaches that point, but you get the point. You get the gist of it, right? Oh, Raymond E. Feist and the magician. Oh, what a magnificent entry into one of fantasy's most classic series with their most classic characters. And it only gets better. I remember Silverthorn and Darkness at Sethanon and all these other books as the story just builds and builds and builds and builds. And these characters just become better friends and more bitter enemies and just more creatures and darkness between the worlds, and then, oh yeah, it's just a juicy, juicy, juicy fantasy. Raymond Feist, oh, dude, I fell in love with these books all over again. I hadn't read them since I was probably 18 years old, and I'm telling you, I reread these two books up here with a smile on my face this big. I was literally like, oh, and I'm not exaggerating. That's the way I read books that I like. And maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but you get the point. You get the point. I loved it. I loved it. Oh my gosh, people. Oh, it's like your high school sweetheart just returned, and you remember all the reasons that you just puppy love with, and then that's, let's face it, a lot of us fantasy readers, we didn't have a lot of high school sweethearts. We were relying on this kind of stuff to fill our lives with emotion. And that's why we're the people we are today. If you've sat through this video this long, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So anyway, let's give Magician, the combo, let's give Magician, Apprentice, Magician Master, one book combined. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10, man. And I think if you watched my top, I think it was on my top 40 fantasies of all time. Can't quite remember if I think it was. But anyway, go buy these and love them.